Real power is quiet. It doesn't chase the room, it shapes it. Silence was Machiavelli's greatest move. Not to retreat, but to rule unseen. If you're still here, you're not just listening. This is where your noise ends, and your control begins. You've been taught that communication is strength, that if you can express it, you can heal it. That vulnerability builds connection and openness invites trust. But no one told you the other half of the truth, that every word is a blueprint, and blueprints get studied, measured, replicated, exploited. We live in a culture addicted to overexposure. You're encouraged to explain your pain in public, to share your opinions before they're mature, to broadcast your goals so they can be prejudged, pre-weakened, pre-owned. You turned your inner world into content and called it connection, but all it did was make you easy to map, easy to predict, easy to bypass. Every time you speak without purpose, you dilute your presence. Every unfiltered thought you share becomes a thread someone else can pull, and eventually that thread becomes a leash. You handed them your pattern and expected them not to use it. That's what they don't tell you. Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to anticipate, to label, to place you in a box where your power can be contained. But when you fall silent, they panic, because silence offers no handles, no rhythm, no clues. You become unreadable, and the unreadable becomes unplayable. Machiavelli understood this. The visible man is the vulnerable man. The one who announces his plans has already forfeited surprise, and the one who reacts out loud becomes easy to control. Because noise is not presence, noise is exposure, and exposure is erosion. You're not here to be transparent. You're here to be opaque by design, not because you're hiding, but because you've outgrown the need to explain. This is what power sounds like. Stillness, restraint, tension with no release. Because silence is not the absence of speech, it is the presence of decision. It is control, measured breath by breath. The quiet person in the room is not weak. They're watching, calculating, listening to what's not said. Have you noticed? In boardrooms, it's the one who speaks last that gets heard most. In dating, it's the one who doesn't rush to reply that holds the gravity. In conflict, it's the one who holds silence, not because they're unsure, but because they're waiting. And in your absence, silence becomes a signal. You say nothing, and they study your stillness like it's a message. You vanish, and their minds fill with assumptions, projections, fantasies, because humans can't tolerate voids. So they fill them, and in that filling they reveal themselves. That's the secret of silence. It's not a void, it's a mirror, and it reflects back more truth than any confession ever could. You're not being mysterious, you're being selective. You're choosing not to perform your identity on cue. And in a world addicted to validation, that is revolutionary. Silence is your refusal to play by their tempo. Silence is your decision to remove the map they use to navigate you. Silence is your evolution out of emotional surveillance. And once you stop leaking signal, you start creating gravity. People feel you, but they can't place you. They notice you, but they can't predict you. They react to you, but they don't understand why. That's power, not the kind you shout, the kind you radiate. And it begins the moment you stop narrating your life and start commanding your presence. You don't disappear all at once. You fade deliberately, quietly, cleanly. At first, they don't even notice. You still reply, you still show up, but something's changed. You've stopped offering pieces of yourself they never earned. You're no longer accessible by default. Your attention is no longer an open tab. Because you've seen what happens when you overexpose, they start assuming. they start expecting, and eventually they start disrespecting. The withdrawal isn't bitterness, it's boundary. It's not you vanishing, it's you removing the parts of you that made you easy to grab, easy to use, easy to read. This is the moment when the mask of performance slips off. The role they assigned you disintegrates. You stop playing the empath, the helper, the always available version of you. You start showing up differently. Less noise, less reaction, less explanation. You listen more. You speak less. You move like everything you do costs something, because it does. And in that quiet space, something else begins to sharpen. Your intuition, your vision, your command. You're no longer moved by urgency. You're not pulled by chaos. You don't rush to respond to the ping, the question, the demand. You take your time, because it's yours. Let them wonder. Let them wait. You're not being distant. You're being intentional. This is the sacred retreat, not a retreat from others. A retreat from the identity you performed to be liked. You're reclaiming your attention from false urgency. You're taking your emotional bandwidth out of places where it was never protected. And yes, they'll notice. They'll call it cold. They'll call it selfish. They'll say, "You've changed." They're right. Because the version of you who overexplained is gone. The one who sought to be understood, gone. The one who stayed in conversations long after they drained you, gone. You're not reacting anymore. You're responding on your terms. You don't fill the silence, you hold it, and when you speak, it bends the air. You used to think withdrawal was weakness. Now you know it's refinement. When you stop offering your thoughts to be managed, you start managing your own clarity. When you stop narrating your moves, you start becoming unpredictable. And when you stop chasing connection, you start attracting presence. Because here's the truth. In a world trained to consume personality, the greatest rebellion is to disappear from the feed. Not just online, emotionally, energetically, psychologically. You become rare, and what is rare becomes powerful, not because it hides, but because it chooses. You're no longer part of their emotional economy. You're not trading reactions for belonging. You're not selling vulnerability for scraps of validation. You've gone from being open access to invitation only. And as the silence grows, so does your center. Your stillness becomes gravity. Your absence becomes presence. They start asking questions. They probe for weakness. They try to pull you back into the version of you they once relied on. But you're not available for the performance anymore. You are still, not because you're lost, but because you've arrived. This is the withdrawal, the ritual of vanishing from their frame, so you can return to your own. You are not disappearing. You are refining, sharpening, becoming. At first, they try to pretend it doesn't bother them. Your silence, your shift, the way you stopped explaining yourself. They say, "You've just been busy. You've always been quiet." It's nothing. But it's not nothing. They feel it. The absence of your patterns, the weight of your restraint, the quiet distance where performance used to be. And suddenly, silence becomes confrontation. Not because you raised your voice, but because you stopped handing them your script. You're no longer predictable, no longer emotionally open source, no longer playing the same character in the story they wrote for you. You've stopped defending yourself, stopped correcting their assumptions, stopped participating in the game of being decoded. And that unsettles them, because now they're left with the unknown. And the unknown demands projection. They start imagining, filling in the blanks, reading into your tone, your timing, your body language. Your silence becomes a mirror, and they don't like what they see in it. Because when you don't give people a version of you to work with, they start reacting to themselves. And that's the confrontation. You didn't accuse, You didn't punish. You didn't raise a single word. You just stopped being available in the way that made them feel in control. And now they spiral. They bring up old wounds. They confess things you never asked. They try to provoke a reaction, not to hurt you, but to find you, because silence erases the map. And once the map is gone, they panic. In relationships, they say, "You've changed. Talk to me. Be honest." But you were never dishonest. You were just too generous with your presence. Now that generosity is gone, and all that's left is the echo chamber of their own expectations, they start talking more, trying harder, explaining things you never challenged, because your silence feels like judgment, even when it's not. They project shame where there was only stillness. They project guilt where there was only clarity. They want the version of you that was easier to manage, the version that kept their insecurities hidden beneath your openness, the version that danced to their tempo so they never had to feel their own rhythm. But that version is gone, and they can feel it. This is power without noise, warfare without motion, dominance without effort. You've become the fixed point, the storm that doesn't move, the variable they can't control. And it breaks them, not because you tried to hurt them, but because your silence removed the scaffolding they leaned on. They start falling into the void they once expected you to fill. And you? You don't flinch. You don't perform. You don't come down from the mountain you built in solitude. Because this silence is not passive. It's calculated. It's the kind of silence that reflects, the kind that reveals. And only those who can sit in that reflection survive it. Let them call you distant. Let them call you cold. Let them call you unrecognizable. That's exactly what happens when you stop showing up in ways that made them comfortable. They say confrontation is loud. But this is confrontation as stillness. This is confrontation as mirror. This is confrontation as truth, unspoken. And truth, especially when unspoken, has a weight most people cannot carry. This is when it shifts, not for them, for you. The silence is no longer effort. It's not something you perform. It's something you've become. You're not holding your tongue. You're holding your position. You're not being mysterious. You're being sovereign. There is no longer an internal debate. No more wondering whether to speak or stay still. You already know. Most of it isn't worth saying. You've seen what happens when you over-explain. They misunderstand anyway. And in misunderstanding you, they reduce you. You no longer give them the chance. You've stopped clarifying what doesn't need to be clarified. You've stopped defending what doesn't need defending. You've stopped translating yourself for those who only hear what fits their comfort. You used to worry about being misunderstood. Now you understand the power of being unreadable. Let them wonder, because at this level, every word costs something. And you don't spend what you haven't calculated. This is when you become dangerous, not because you threaten anyone, but because you can no longer be provoked. You've mastered the pause between reaction and response. You don't lunge. You don't chase. You don't prove. You move in silence, and silence follows you when you leave. This is the ascent, where silence becomes identity, where stillness becomes signal, where presence becomes the final form of power. You walk into rooms and say nothing, and still set the rhythm. You speak after everyone, and your words reframe the entire conversation. You don't respond. You don't explain. You simply vanish from their rhythm. No signals, no updates, no presence to grasp. And yet, they feel you more than ever. And yet, your silence trends in their minds, because the rarest presence is the one who doesn't perform. They ask, "Are you okay?" Because they can't read you anymore. They ask, "What are you thinking?" because their own reflection in your stillness is starting to shake. You don't answer, not out of cruelty, but because your energy is no longer a public utility. You are not here to comfort their discomfort. You are not here to soften your intensity for mass consumption. You are here to move through the world without leaking signal, to observe without being read, to decide without being discussed. And when you do speak, they feel it, because now silence has made your voice rare, and what is rare carries weight, and what carries weight shapes the room. You've gone from a participant to a presence, from reactive to reflective, from visible to legendary. This is the ascent. You are no longer in the game. You are the board. People wait for your signal. They measure your silence. They quote your pauses like scripture, and you say nothing, because the final stage of presence is this. You don't need to be heard to have influence. You don't need to be seen to be known. You don't need to be liked to be respected. Your silence is now proof of what you've become, a sovereign, a force, an archetype. You are no longer narrating your power. You are radiating it, not to impress, but to move in alignment with yourself. You don't seek peace. You are peace, and your peace now intimidates those who still live in noise. You don't seek attention. You are attention, not by presence, but by absence. You've stopped chasing alignment, and now alignment happens around you. This is what the mountain feels like. Rooted, silent, unmoving, but felt everywhere. This is not the silence of retreat. This is the silence of command. You are not avoiding life. You are choosing how it's allowed to approach you. And most of it no longer qualifies. You're not quiet anymore. You're composed. You're not mysterious. You're precise. You're not distant. You're just no longer reachable by noise. This silence is no longer something you hold. It holds you. It shapes your rhythm, your presence, your very way of moving through the world. You don't seek solitude anymore. You are solitude. Even when surrounded, even when seen, you carry a stillness that doesn't ask for understanding. It doesn't require translation. It doesn't seek confirmation. It just is. Because now silence isn't the gap between your words. It's the source of them. You speak when it matters. You act when it's time. You hold when others fold. You've become someone who can't be defined by surface-level labels, not because you're hiding, but because you've grown beyond the need to be decoded. You no longer need to be gotten. You don't need to be relatable. You don't need to be known in pieces to feel whole. This is embodiment, not what you say, what you exude. You are the weight in the room, the pause in the conversation, the reflection in their mind. You don't demand respect. You generate it without asking, because your silence is no longer passive. It's a boundary. It's a signal. It's a weapon. And it's a sanctuary. People come to you differently now, more slowly, more carefully. They feel the edge around your energy. They know they're not entitled to access anymore. They ask you how you became this way. You don't give them a blueprint, because there isn't one. You simply stopped giving everything away. You stopped bleeding explanation. You stopped over-narrating your thoughts. You stopped packaging yourself to be palatable. You are not here to perform. You are here to embody. No one needs to know your next move. No one needs to hear your inner world to feel its force. You don't wear your past like a flag anymore. You wear your composure like armor. And silence is the new language you speak fluently, even when others only hear static. Let them wonder, let them assume, let them project. You owe them no response, no correction, no closure. Because peace isn't about resolution, it's about removal. You've removed yourself from the cycles that drained you, the roles that boxed you in. the dynamics that fed on your openness. You don't ghost people, you evolve past them. And some people cannot follow you where you've gone. You don't announce your boundaries. You are your boundaries, and your presence alone teaches people how to approach or not. They used to know your every thought. Now they know only your silence. And that silence carries a message more powerful than anything you could have said. You've changed, and you're not coming back. This isn't detachment. This is presence without performance, connection without compromise. You're not cold, you're clear. You're not aloof, you're aligned. You're not unavailable, you're simply selective. And from this place, you create, not to be seen, not to be praised, but because it flows from your center, undisturbed. You're no longer proving your depth. You are your depth, lived, felt, embodied. So let them talk, let them guess, let them echo the old version of you they still think exists. You've already moved on, quietly, deliberately and completely.